Welcome to the Pitchwerks podcast. I'm Scott McTaggart. Over the last 20 years, I've been a sales rep, a marketer, a manager, an executive, a consultant, and an advisor. This show is designed to give you access to my list of contacts so that you can learn more about how to present your ideas at work and succeed in your career.
Startups and salespeople, marketers and managers from the Epicast Network in Pittsburgh. It's the Pitchwerks podcast.
When you go around and you talk about the kinds of things that I talk about with people, it is remarkable when people say, yes, I want that.
Right. Hey, everybody, it's Scott. It's Wednesday. It's the Pitchwerks podcast. It's everything you were hoping it was going to be. This week, we're talking to Amanda Lowe. She has a really cool idea to give you a custom-designed organizational structure at your office. It's a brand new consulting firm. We're telling a story about how hard it is sometimes to sell a complex new idea. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about social media, reviews on iTunes, and the usual begging and pleading that I do with you each week. I'm just going to harass and harangue, and I'm going to ask you to review this fine program. Jump into iTunes and say, this is a 5-star program with only the finest sound quality, thanks to Buzzy and all of his blood, sweat, toil, and tears. Or it's a 1-star program, and that's because no matter how good of a job Buzzy is doing, Scott is still behind the microphone. Whatever your options, whatever your decisions, those are up to you. It's a free country. But do me a favor, get in there, give us a rating, tell us what you think of the show. Feel free to, to give us the feedback, because people need to know whether or not they're going to like this show when they find it in iTunes, and this is how they would do that. So all the social media channels, we're always Pitchwerks, Pitchwerks, and that's also true for the website, pitchwerks.com. Hit us up, put the E in works. Let's jump into the conversation with Amanda, and let's talk about selling something really complicated to people that, that still need it. All right, here we go with Amanda Lowe. And Amanda, I have 100 questions for you, but let's start with, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, Scott.
Tell us, when you first decided that Flywheel was going to be a thing, right? Like, what was the moment where you said, this is definitely happening? Tell me about that.
Well, I'll tell you what. I met my business partner, Adam Nelson, last year. Early on in the year, we were at a networking event, and we totally connected. We had a great time. At that time, his big project was City of Play. And so I became his lead researcher for City of Play, and I was doing some consulting with him. And then right at the beginning of January, I went and I had dinner with a friend of mine, and he's like, what have you been up to? I was telling him about City of Play, and that we were working together and we were thinking about different ways to adapt what City of Play was doing for businesses. And he said, you have to come help my company. Let's book a meeting with you and Adam this week.
So there's this sudden inrush of enthusiasm you didn't even see coming.
No, I was like, okay, really? And he was like, yeah. And so I got out of dinner. I called Adam. I said, you're not going to believe this.
Someone really loves what we're talking about.
Somebody loves what we're talking about, and he wants to book a meeting with us like in 2 days. And then we went to that meeting, and then my friend was like, all right, I want to meet you guys again on Thursday that same week. And so then in between the two meetings, Adam and I sat down and we invented the Flywheel concept, and it's been a thing ever since. And
that's gorgeous, though, because you had a customer before you had a product.
That's right.
And that's what they tell you to do.
When you go around and you talk about the kinds of things that I talk about with people, it is remarkable when people say, yes, I want that. Because a lot of the things that I talk about, people are interested in, but they are like, oh, that's a little, how does that fit in with what people need or want?
Well, you've studied these concepts to the point where it's really easy for you, I think, to lose people, because you take all of those building blocks that got you to this current state of concept, right? And they don't have those building blocks underneath them, so they can't reach the same height as you can in terms of like, what the next thing is in psychology, and they're like, I don't know what the first thing was in psychology.
Exactly.
The reason I wanted you to come in was to talk about the fact that there are perfectly useful services that are very difficult for people to understand. So what's the current version of the pitch?
So at the moment, we're talking about Flywheel as an organizational design studio.
Okay.
All right. So we help human-driven companies develop better ways to work.
Okay.
And then the next thing is I usually see what somebody gives me back from that.
Right.
Right? So then there's a few different ways that I can branch off, like little different dimensions of the pitch that I can take, depending on whether I'm getting the "that's the craziest thing I ever heard" face, or the "oh, that's really interesting" face.
The elusive choose your own adventure pitch. I like this one.
But I mean, really at this point, pretty much all of the pitching I'm doing is in person.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what I'm choosing is, okay, I say organizational design studio. Do their eyes light up? Do they give me the eye roll that they think that I don't see, right? Because like they're like, oh, who's this flake?
Oh boy.
Do they turn their head a little quixotically and wonder like, ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I think you saw me do that. I fall into that last category when I was sitting here going like, okay, I know what all those words mean, but let's think about what they mean when they crash into each other.
So organizational design, what that really means is thinking about the way that your organizational structure can be designed to support and enable the kind of work that you want to achieve. So if you think about traditional hierarchical systems, that's pretty much the standard organizational structure that everybody uses.
Right, because it's what they learned when they were coming up.
And it's basically pretty much the only one with some exceptions. Occasionally, you will see people try to do a flat
Right, I was just
structure.
about to say, once a year you see the article about the organization that decided to go flat.
Right, and so flat structures can work, but there's a lot of problems with them, and a lot of people don't think about how would you actually design a flat structure that would really work.
Right.
Like they think, okay, we're going to flatten this and that's going to make everything better, but
I
they don't
vaguely
think about
remember there was something like this at Zappos.
Oh yeah, so holacracy.
There it is. The word was escaping me,
Right.
but I remembered where it was.
So actually I spent, even before I met Adam several years ago, I spent a while digging down the Zappos and holacracy rabbit hole because
Okay.
I started to get really, really interested in this question of how can you create distributed authority in organizations? How can you create organizations where more people are empowered to make more decisions and tackle more complex problem solving?
Right.
And so how do you create a situation where more people can have more, essentially creativity, right? In the sense that they are able to have
More control.
More control over what they do and actually tap into their local knowledge and expertise, right? Because one of the problems with hierarchical structures is that the decision-making about the complex problems is offloaded into supervisors and managers.
People that you assume somehow have that bird's eye view or trench knowledge, whatever it is that this thing needs.
Honestly, higher skills, better education.
Okay.
Like better capacity to think. This is sort of what that was built on, right?
Right.
This idea that as you go up a hierarchy, what you're getting is increased skill, increased ability to think properly, increased ability to solve problems, also probably greater strategy.
Right.
And let's say it, like more intelligence is what people are thinking. With
Well,
all that.
yeah, because that's what they think they're paying for when they make the job offer to that person.
That's what they think. And, it used to be the case that a lot of people were not as well educated as they are today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of your entry-level people in ordinary white-collar positions have college educations, and that was not always the case. So the thing is that we're in a situation right now where people who would be in the less empowered parts of these hierarchies actually are capable of making way bigger contributions.
Than ever before. Because the educational piece.
Education, access to information, the technology, like the multiplication of our powers that technology gives us is pretty incredible. The situation is that we actually need organizations that can enable the contributions of everybody.
Right.
We need people to be, like organizations to be able to adapt, and we need organizations to be able to use the local knowledge and in touchness with the problem that anybody in any given part of the organization has.
Now, you just actually said what I don't want to call it a rebuttal, but I had a thought while you were explaining about what you get going up the chart. Without even realizing it, my thought on it has been the person higher up the ladder benefits from one main thing, and that is proximity to the master plan.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
And that's all I've been thinking.
Well,
I didn't even think about the fact that that person might be smarter than the people beneath them. It was always about just proximity to the master plan.
So proximity to the master plan, that's a really nice way to say that, actually, because one of the things that I've been thinking, the way that I've been thinking about that is access to information.
Yeah.
Right, about the organization. Access to information about what the organization needs, access to information about what the organization wants, about where it's going, strategy, all that stuff.
We're thinking about buying this company. We're thinking about laying off these people, whatever is going to happen tomorrow.
Exactly. So the farther you get away from being in those hierarchical positions, the less you know about that.
Right.
And the less you're able to make certain kinds of contributions because you don't know where anything is going.
Because you're shooting in the dark.
Right.
You have no idea.
Yeah. And so, like, one of the things that I've been thinking about in terms of the kinds of things that we're interested in is how communication can be handled in organizations that are structured a little bit differently so that there is this greater alignment, right? How can even say, let's say you have somebody who's a customer service representative.
Yeah.
They are in the lowest paid role in your company, on some retail floor.
Right.
But they actually have tons of information for you about the, inefficiencies or the ineffectiveness of the way that you're running things.
They're taking the beatings. I mean, let's call it what it is. When the customer comes in angry, they take the beating.
Right.
And then you sit in your air-conditioned office and go, well, they shouldn't be taking those beatings as much as they are.
Right. Anyway, so you're in there. You hear somehow that there are a lot of complaints, right?
Yeah.
There's some kind of beatings that are occurring to your customer service people, and you think, okay, I'll try to solve that problem.
Right.
And then you actually don't understand what the problem really is. If you would ask any of your intelligent customer service people who live through this problem every day, I'll think of one for you that I remember from my old customer service days.
Okay.
I used to work for the now defunct Borders Books and Music.
Oh, yeah.
And I had also worked at the also now defunct Tower Records.
Oh, wow.
So when I worked at Tower, one of the things that was great about Tower, and actually Tower was a company that was bootstrapped up from the bottom by the guy whose name I can't remember. I'm sorry about that. But he was really employee focused. Like, there were a lot of policies at Tower that were really good for employees.
Okay.
It was a good place to work.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they had was their inventory management system would delete something as soon as you sold it. So it would real-time deletion.
Yeah.
Right? So you sell a CD and it is removed from your inventory. This is great because it turns out when people want to look for CDs, like somebody says, do you have the new Tupac?
Right.
You say, let me see. You look it up in the computer. If it says there's one, okay, maybe you don't have one because maybe there was an error.
Yeah, somebody could have accidentally put it on the wrong shelf or something.
But if it says that there's two or more, you know that they're there. You go and you get them, or you order it for somebody if you don't have it. Right?
Yeah.
This makes customer service a dream.
Right.
Especially if you imagine a very large store with a bunch of product in very small pieces, right? Scattered over
That
the
looks
whole.
all the same
It looks
from
all
a distance.
the same from a distance, all this stuff. And so when I went to work for Borders after that, they had this system that would take a month to delete.
Oh, boy. So everyone's always yelling because you never can tell anybody, and then they have to go pick through.
Or you have
because
to
you're
go,
too busy on a Saturday to go find everything.
Well, but your job is to go pick through. So then you don't even know if you're on some kind of impossible mission.
Right.
Or whether they're really there somewhere, or whether your incompetent colleague put them in the wrong place, or whether they're still in the shipping and receiving, or you know, so which is all the way across this massive store. And so you have this mission where you're supposed to have this really great customer service. You know, Borders actually really wanted you to deliver very high quality customer service.
Right.
But the way that their computer system was set up was really disabling for that. The thing that I wanted to say is that, you know, in a situation where if we imagined that being organized differently, where I as the like customer service representative, not even a supervisor, just daily trenches person delivering that service on the floor, if I actually was asked to solve that problem, I could have solved that problem right the first time, which is to say we need a different computer, like we need a different inventory management system.
Right.
And on top of that, we also need to have buyers in the stores because they also, the difference between Tower and Borders was that every tower had its own buyer. And at Borders, all the buying was done out of Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Okay.
So the difference between the tower example and the Borders Books and Music example here is that tower, the way that the operations were set up, right, and the way that the organization was designed, is that each store was designed to be maximally responsive to its local situation.
Got it.
Okay? And at Borders, they had a centralized system that really sacrificed a lot of sensitivity and ability to adapt, right?
Okay.
So their hierarchical system really, it's like the nerve endings didn't go all the way to the end of the finger.
That's a problem.
So what that would mean if you hired us is we would have some kind of initial consultation where we would talk about what kinds of problems you're having and what sort of, how big of a scale those issues are.
How many stores do you have?
Right.
How many executives are involved
exactly.
here?
And
how many customers do you serve?
Right. Is this just, your manufacturing operations? Is this the entire company? How many divisions do you, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then really the initial significant product is for us to come in and do a systemic analysis, which is actually kind of a big project.
So, and remember, I don't know about your area, but I'm a pitch guy. I'm trying to figure out how it is that we can relate this content to somebody else. And I what I'm hearing you say is, I know the things you wish the people at the edge knew you want to know. And that's a clumsy way of saying it. So let me try again.
Who are the people at the edge?
The people at the edge would be the people who are actually in the store having the problem, on the manufacturing floor having the problem, right? So we've identified that there's this sort of nexus in the executive office between higher skill level and training, right? And proximity to the master plan.
Right.
And those people at the edge are assumed not to have either one of them. Right. So even a very well-educated person at the edge is still at a disadvantage.
Right.
Because of the proximity to your master plan, your mergers, your acquisitions, your, long-term strategic planning.
Right.
So the customer hires Flywheel as a way to augment that person to say, Amanda knows what we think, and we don't want to go observe this ourselves. So she will observe it on our behalf with the benefit of the experience of that employee at the edge and bring us back content to crunch into this machine, right? That's way more useful than just a suggestion box.
Yes. I mean, so the thing is that a lot of times it's the case whenever you talk to executives who are having some kind of problem that they're aware and they've observed the problem as well as they can at that point.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not that they don't want to go see it. It's that they're looking at something and they can see some dimensions of the problem, but still they don't know how to solve it.
I am reluctant to, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to challenge you on that.
Okay.
I think they don't want to because it's one of those things that by observing it, they change it. By being there, conversations about other subjects can pop up. Assumptions about intent pop up. Things that color the final product. So if Mr. Exxon shows up on an oil rig, that is not the way the oil rig runs.
Right, exactly.
You're going to see the weirdest operation of that rig, the most outlying data point of all time.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So it is true that part of the nature of organizations is that they are highly political.
Right.
And who's looking at you really matters.
Yeah.
Right. So earlier today, I was talking with someone and they were asking me, well, how do you know if someone's frustrated in an organization? It's like, well, it turns out that if the right person asks them, they want to tell you.
Right.
And in fact, they will often tell you in great detail exactly what's frustrating them because they don't have another way to say it, right? Mm-hmm. Or there's no other way for them to communicate that. And so it is our job, right, to get information that can't be gotten in another manner.
Yep.
And it is also our job to analyze and interpret that information, not just in terms of the content of what people say,
yep,
but really looking at the organizational and operational systems that are functioning there. So people will tell us things, and then our interpretation isn't necessarily literally what that person said, because somebody might. So, for example, when I was a customer service representative at Borders, I might not have said, okay, we need to make all of our stores maximally adaptive and responsive for their individual situation, like individual context.
Right. Because that is not communicating the feeling that is actually the message.
So the thing is that was the thing that would make me the difference between an executive and somebody on the floor, because I'm not thinking in terms of business systems that way, right? I'm not thinking about the business model. I'm not thinking about the operational model. I'm just like, we need a better computer system, you guys.
Yeah.
Because this is our problem.
And people are yelling.
And and I can't do my job. Like I have a loss of integrity in my customer service here, and it feels frustrating, and I hate that. I love giving good service.
Yeah. So now we've got this room. The vice president is really keen on what you're trying to do.
Uh-huh.
The president's not, and maybe there's two other vice presidents, and they're not either, right? So you've got four people, right? Now, and it's not so much that they're not keen to it, but they don't get it yet. So it's a no until you make me say yes is typically the rule of the boardroom.
Absolutely.
Right? It's a no until I see.
I mean, that's most of life, really, right?
Yeah, well, if you're doing it right.
Yeah.
I seriously.
Yes.
Say no until you have to say yes is the way to handle the business part of your life.
Absolutely.
There's no question there. Hey, you want some aluminum siding? No. Yeah. There's no siding on your house. Well, then yes.
Yeah.
Anyway. So if I'm them and I'm trying to put the brakes on this train, I start pushing back on jargon.
Right.
And I start pushing back that I don't understand what you're talking about, even if it's willing. Like it's willing ignorance of the conversation to illustrate that we shouldn't do this.
Sure.
And I love the idea of taking the thing that is the weapon you're scared of and making it your brand mascot, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So I would love to see you go in a direction that says like jargon will save work, or like jargon will save the world, right? Or useful jargon, like you get there, because it's like you can't have this conversation that really will improve people's work lives and lose sight of that. When you and I were doing pre-show conversation, I said, I like the word finally. For you, like finally someone's listening. Finally, we're going to do this the right way, like that concept, right? And since we talked, and that hasn't been that long, it's only been a couple weeks, but I went further down that road, and I keep thinking that the real fear here is the saboteur on the client side, who didn't study this, doesn't see value in it, because people and emotional skills and those kinds of things. That's the same as accounting or anything else. Like, it's a discipline. You either get it or you don't. And if it's not my functional area, I'm not worried about it.
So for me, all of the pitch-related stuff is entirely choose your own adventure, depending on what people are saying or not saying to me.
That's great.
And their body language and their facial expressions. So if I'm in a room where there's one yes and three no's, I am looking to see what the different no's are, right?
Yes.
So there's maybe a no that says everything this person's body language and the things that they're saying is, the no is, these people are flakes, get them out of my office. I wouldn't write a check for these people in a million years, right?
Right.
So that's one no.
You cut ties and walk.
That's one no.
Yep.
Right, exactly. I'm not going to do anything. Yeah, there's no, that's my view also, right? There's nowhere to go. If there's a no that's like, okay, I can see that this is really interesting, but I don't know if we're really going to be able to use this.
Okay.
Or
questionable value.
Right, exactly. So then my question also is, can they use it, right? Like, so part of the conversation there is, can we reach some kind of understanding where I can tell that they can use it? Because if I can tell that they can use it, then I'll tell them how I can see them using it. Right.
And that's good. I
Right?
mean, all you're doing is you're taking an objection of questionable value and responding to it with, here is the value that may not have been perceived up to this point.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. But the thing is also, I've got to be ready to walk away if in fact there isn't a good value for this person, right? Like,
well, that's just ethics.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, not everybody has it for sure.
Yeah. But it's like, like my job is actually to be selling them something that they can use, that they will have the highest possible quality experience with.
I would say that probably also your clients run together, right? Like, the person that would buy this and those 3 other people that would also
Absolutely.
buy it. So
Absolutely.
you definitely don't want to pollute that
Oh,
environment.
no. And
Right.
and personally, like I really like doing good work. Like
Right.
it gives me the most pleasure and fulfillment when I do work that really works. So then third no,
Yeah.
right? Or potentially third no is, how am I going to sell this to the guy who writes the checks?
Yep.
Or the lady who writes the checks? Or like, how do I know that there isn't going to be this like creep, right?
Yeah.
Of this project that's going to become totally unmanageable?
Which can come from 2 different places. 1, they haven't properly sized how big their problem is, or 2, they're not properly educated on what you're representing in this contract.
Right. And so that's where the discussion needs to be on things like specifics. So exactly what would the scope of this project be? How would those parameters be changed? Under what circumstances?
And here's the red line.
Exactly.
We're done when.
Exactly. These are the outcomes you can expect, right? This is how it happens, right? If we were to go to the next service,
Yeah.
that happens this time, and potentially if they want to talk about how much money that costs, you could talk about that.
Yeah.
But then there's also the some of the stuff that we're still developing. And Adam is like my favorite numbers and spreadsheet making person. And
That's good because he works with you.
Yeah, it is good because I need that as a human experience specialist. I'm not the best.
You're not the Excel person.
I am not the best at it. Not that other people aren't, but I'm not. So one of the ways that you can measure this, right? That is one of the things you can talk to with people is, okay, so engagement, right, is one way to talk about how people are affected by the work that they're doing, right? And it turns out that highest engagement companies compared to the lowest engagement companies, this is from a Gallup report in 2015. So highest engagement companies are up to 21% more productive, up to 22% more profitable.
That's a big number there.
And they have 25 to 65% less turnover.
And that
is a lot of money.
is
That is a
ton
lot
of payback.
of money, right? So the thing is that the way that we're interested in designing organizational processes, workflows, but also organizational structures, right, to maximally enable the contributions of employees at every level.
Yeah.
Right? So that's all about bringing up the engagement of employees.
Yeah.
Because it has to do with them being able to contribute, right?
And they feel like they're on the team.
Absolutely. Well, they are they become the team, right?
Well, but before maybe they didn't feel like it. Maybe they
Absolutely
felt
not.
like they were so far from that master plan that it was going to march on whether they were there or not. And that's terrible for that turnover number that you
Oh
cited.
yeah, totally. So the thing is, when people can make contributions, they typically like working better. People like to make progress on the work that they're doing, right? Like people like to actually accomplish stuff.
Right. And I want to ask a side question about that. Is it because of the recognition or is it because the fulfillment is innate?
I think it's both, right? So if you think about it, motivation is the internal experiential side, incentives are the external contextual side.
Right. Your boss gives you a $100 bonus and brings you up in front of everybody. That's an incentive.
That's an incentive. And
But you had to want to do it whether you were going to get the incentive or not.
Or the incentive was motivating for you. Some people are really strongly motivated by additional money. Some people are motivated by recognition.
Okay.
Some people are motivated by flexibility. There's all kinds of different things, all kinds of different sorts of incentives you can make. But almost everybody is actually incentivized by being able to contribute.
That's amazing.
It's not-
because it feels like everybody's totally different, but on this you're saying they're kind of the same.
If you go to a place where you are supposed to do things all day,
Right.
and
And
you
I do,
you are
and I am.
systematically prevented from being able to do anything meaningful there or that solve any meaningful problems that you're constantly dealing with, this is incredibly disengaging, right? This is demotivating.
Okay.
If you go to a place every day where you are expected to make meaningful contributions and address and solve the problems that are right at your doorstep, and you can actually do those things effectively,
Right. You go home and you get to tell people about the challenges that you beat today, and it feels good.
it gives you energy.
This feels like it's fairly unique. Am I right? Like, do you bump into other companies that are doing what you're doing?
Not locally so far, but there are there is a sort of space where people are thinking about how do you do organizations differently? Like
Right.
how do you
This is an industry that's forming.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so that leads to my follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some people don't want to do this in public, and I don't blame them for that, right? Like, it's like, okay, I shared, but my secret sauce is now secret. The 11 herbs and spices are in the vault, right? Because I do think that it would be interesting to watch the evolution. I would like the show to adopt Flywheel a little bit and just watch over like 6 months what happens with the way you present these ideas and kind of like the way you think about yourselves in presenting, right?
Okay.
Because I do think whether people are selling virtualized servers or cellular phone data plans or consulting services that most people don't understand,
Right.
it's the same problem. And it's, I have value that you need to understand,
Right.
but I rely on you to believe that in order to make the deal. So I'm going to ask you every so often just to tell us what the current state or the current version of your vanilla pitch is. And if you're willing to go along with that, I would love it.
Absolutely.
All right. So if people want to reach out, how would they find you?
So it turns out that we're on the internet.
Oh, come on.
Can you believe it?
They killed Borders. And that wasn't cool
Actually,
at all.
The one that broke my heart was Tower, but goflywheelgo.com.
Thanks for coming in, Amanda.
Thanks for having me,
Check
Scott.
out goflywheelgo.com on the interwebs.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, that's all the time we have this week. Thanks for tuning in. I know a lot of you have very complex products, and this is a good conversation. I'm glad Amanda is gonna report back and tell us how it's going. If you've got something that you're working on that you're not quite sure how it is that you're losing the audience, feel free to use those social channels. Hit me up. I'm not going to promise I'm going to be right, but I will take a stab at it. As I said at the front end, it's always Pitchwerks, Pitchwerks. Twitter is my favorite, but you can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. And just tell me what you're working on. You know that in 7 days we're going to have another show, but I feel like telling you anyway. Take care of yourselves in the meantime.
The Pitchwerks podcast comes to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a production of the Epicast Network and McTaggart, LLC. Engineering and production by Buzzy Torek and Nick Miller. For more information, show feedback, and ad sales, visit pitchwerks.com. pitchwerks.com. On social media, find and follow the show on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram using that same brand name, pitchwerks.